In response to the COVID-19 pandemic, schools all across the United States are closed for in-person teaching, an uncharted territory for administrators, teachers, and students alike. Online learning has all of a sudden become the new norm. To say the least, this new mode of learning has been a challenge. Even as a senior in high school, I have found it hard to focus in my Zoom classes. For some, however, the challenge is not as simple as that. Distance learning exposed a problem in the United States that has long existed: the digital divide. Put simply, the digital divide is the gap between the rich, educated people who have access to technology and those who don't. For students who are from low-income families or don't have permanent housing, having a computer and stable internet is not something they can take for granted. Their limited access to technology could hinder their education pursuits significantly. The homeless population in Santa Barbara is often marginalized and overlooked.
Because of, beautiful Santa Barbara being what it is, it's easy to put it under a rug or sweep it under the rug. Santa Barbara County is actually the second largest homeless population in California.
In the past week, I conducted 4 interviews to learn more about how local homeless students in Southern California have been affected by the pandemic and what we can do to help them.
So we launched our digital learning program 5 years ago, and it was in response to this digital divide because, as more and more the internet becomes a basic need just for people to access services that used to be available on paper, and now a lot of things are online only, our families and the students are being left behind. So our families are in shelters, they're in motels, we have foster kids in group homes, and we also have families that are unsheltered, so they're living in vehicles or they're living in tents on the street. All of them have difficulty with internet access. Sometimes the shelter won't allow Wi-Fi in the shelter. That's something we've encountered. Motels will say that they have Wi-Fi, but then it doesn't work in the motel room. Even if there is a computer lab, especially for students, it's limited hours, and a lot of times it's for adults only. So the digital divide is very, very real for our students, and it always has been.
I think that families who are struggling with the digital divide all pretty much are kind of feeling the same effects, but one of the differences for the homeless population is that they are already grappling with so many challenges and obstacles when it comes to education. So, for instance, homeless children are more likely to suffer from food insecurity. They're more likely to show up to class tired, not getting a full night's sleep, or just not having basic necessities in general. Oftentimes, the factors that have led up to their homelessness, and including just the experience of homelessness, have been traumatic. And so that in and of itself, it changes the brain. And so you have children who are struggling to concentrate. And if you add to that this challenge of not having access to the tools that they need in order to complete assignments, getting behind in the curriculum because of the digital divide, then it's just going to compound the issues that they're already facing and really make it difficult for them to keep up with their peers, much less to excel or succeed.
It was just one more thing to add to their plate when you're dealing with, how do I get food? How do I get, the basics of life? Adding online learning is just one other thing that's just way beyond the basic needs.
It's kind of like the way I describe it with everything that's going on right now with the pandemic is all these cracks that, were always in our society in terms of a safety net for folks. They just become glaringly obvious, know? So it's like the digital divide was always there, but kids could go to school, and school was a safe place for our students. It was one of the few places in their life where they had some consistency, they had a free lunch, they had stability. And now that's been taken from them. Some of them are in a level of quarantine inside the shelter where they can't even leave their room with their parents. It's pretty hard for them right now.
Well, before COVID-19, homeless students could participate in after-school programs run by districts, or tutoring or homework programs run by nonprofits. Even older students could go to Starbucks or McDonald's, and they can, if they had a school-issued iPad, they could get internet there and work, late hours and kind of carve out a place for themselves to do their assignments. But with COVID-19, all of those places are closed. Another example is even at Transition House, the homeless shelter. Normally we're closed from 8 in the morning to 5 in the evening, Monday through Friday. That's a time when most of the parents are working or looking for work, and the children could be in school and after school programs. So we immediately opened up when school closed due to COVID-19. But what we weren't able to do was to open up our computer labs. So we have a lab in our children's program where students would come in around 5 o'clock, and from 5 to 6:30 they could work on homework, and they had access to those desktop computers and they had internet service. But that had to close down so that, you know, if there was anybody that was infected, that it wouldn't be spread. We also have a computer lab in the evenings from 7 p.m. to 9 p.m. with childcare for younger siblings or whatever the case may be. That also was not a safe environment once we were dealing with this pandemic. And that's just our little local example of how it's basically changed everything. So for homeless families who were really reliant on those outside entities to provide a place and to provide access, all of that is extremely limited, if not non-existent now, thanks to COVID-19. And this is all happening at the same time that the percentage of work that's being done on a device and with a need for internet access is now skyrocketed, right? I know it's not 100% of the work for every student, but it's pretty close to 100% of what a lot of students are doing right now. So it is really, really challenging for families that are in homeless situations right now.
Well, there's the lack of school, which means the lack of food. We have some districts that have actually continued, they would pay for the kids to get to school from whatever stop, you know, their RV is at, or, you know, the families would get them to a central place, and then that's where they would be picked up every day and driven to school, or they were living in a motel and a bus would pick them up at the motel and drive them. I actually have a couple of districts that continued that just so the student could get to school, get the food, and get back home again. I think one of the big things is food and stability. I mean, at least they went to school and there was a stable 6 hours in their life, but now that's gone. So what fills those 6 hours?
Imagine that the only thing, the only escape, the only safe place, the only sure meal of the day being completely taken away from them because of the pandemic. And so it's a big issue, and it's very sad, but it's a reality for a lot of them. So life is harder for a normal person. Imagine how much harder it is for a homeless youth. One of the things that we're doing right now is buying things for shelters so that the kids can be entertained, art supplies, school supplies, things that the shelters weren't prepared for because they're not doing school there. Basically, what our office did is we just called and asked, how can we help? How can we support? What do you need? And since the pandemic is such a new thing, our funding was able to be flexible. So we were able to buy and order a lot of things for different shelters around. And also just being really connected and trying to work together with the districts to see what they need and how they need support. We sent out a couple of surveys already, trying to find out how we can help support them. You know, questions like, how are you enrolling new students? How are you identifying if they're not doing it in person? How are you making sure that they're being identified? How are they getting their devices? Are they getting their devices? You know, are they getting hotspots if they can't have internet access? Well, what about meals? You know, are these students getting offered the same opportunities that everybody else does? So basically, that's what it is. Just trying to make sure that we shorten the gap a little bit.
as the County Office of Ed, I'm also the grantee by the state, so I get the funds. So I do a huge backpack drive. Right now, tomorrow, I'll be loading up. I have about 750 hygiene kits. So I've contacted all of my districts and said, what can I, what do you need? And it looks like I'm going to double that order from what they need. So hygiene kits, basic needs. The food kind of has been taken care of. I sent out a gift card to every single one of the county office families, just like to a Subway or to a fast food restaurant, just something different.
So School on Wheels, we serve Southern California. Our primary mission is to help break the cycle of homelessness through education. And we believe that the best way to do that is through one-on-one tutoring and mentorship of children that are experiencing homelessness. So we also do group tutoring, but our core focus is the one-on-one student-tutor relationship. And prior to COVID-19, we had in the field at any given time around 1,200 to 1,500 active tutors working at over 408 sites across Southern California. And we always had not always, for the last 5 years, we've had an online tutoring program. And that's something we've continued to grow, our digital learning program and online tutoring program. But this moment when the crisis hit, we realized that we had to immediately pivot and try to get all of our tutors trained in online tutoring and connected with their students as quickly as humanly possible. So that is part of our model right now is all of our coordinators have learned how to be trainers for online tutoring. As soon as we can get a student with an internet-enabled device and we can get the permissions to have internet set up for them, we do. I'm not going to lie, our overall numbers of tutors that are actively tutoring right now has dropped dramatically because of the lack of internet and Wi-Fi for our students. But there are like bright, shining moments where the tutors get to start online tutoring their student again. And it's really beautiful to see. One of our coordinators who's also a tutor said he and his student cried when they finally got to see each other after 2 months of not really getting to see each other's faces. So yeah, there are these sort of it's an overall incredibly difficult time, but I think I have been very impressed by how School on Wheels and my team has responded to it.
Well, for our students at the shelter, we have children's program staff available to support families with school-related issues during the daytime. So I mentioned we used to have the shelter closed between 8 and 5 p.m. As soon as the schools closed, we opened up 24 hours a day. And so our families definitely have a safe place to be. The students utilize our dining area and several downstairs meeting rooms for study space, as well as their own family rooms if they need to. I know that the Santa Barbara Public Library created a great program. They help not only with academic assignments, but even just with the technology piece. So it's called, I think, Virtual Student Support, and that's offered through our public library. I'm not as involved in education as I was in my previous position, but I do know that the homeless liaisons, for instance, for the county education office and the Santa Barbara Unified School District liaisons, that they're reaching out to students and families spread throughout Santa Barbara to make sure that they have the devices and the access to internet that they need.
We need to be able to educate and let people know that there's a real issue. And then there is a big population of homeless students in Santa Barbara, and that there is law that protects them, and that there is things that we can do.
The most important thing people can do right now is to, spread the word, and if they can raise funds, because I think nonprofits as a whole, a lot of nonprofits aren't going to be able to survive the sort of all the economic impacts of the pandemic. It's really important that people understand what we do and why we do it and why it's important to our students, and the difference that School on Wheels and the tutors that we support can make a difference for these kids.